Okay, good morning. My name is Marcus, and I'm here to talk about AI-powered adaptive learning. Now, picture this. You're an employee in a global organization. You've just sat down with your line manager, and you've discussed that there's going to have to be some personal development and career development, and that's going to be in sustainability, leadership, you name it. You're enthusiastic, you're ready to go. This day and age, that means you're going to be part of a digital journey and a non-digital journey, but it will usually start with the digital journey. So off you go. You're on the LMS, you're ready to go, you click on the sustainability program, and despite you having been in the industry for some years, knowing a little bit about the science, knowing a little bit about supply chains, knowing a little bit about your business, obviously, you realize very quickly, and your heart sinks, you're going to have to click through bloody everything. I knew this, I didn't have to watch this video, I knew this. Now picture this instead. You go on there, and the system starts asking you a couple of questions, and you go, yes, I know that. I knew that about the supply chain. I knew that about the science behind sustainability. And boom, the system adjusts. It adjusts to your current knowledge, and it keeps adjusting by asking questions and mixing the questions with the content. It keeps adjusting to how you're progressing and what you know. Now that would be fully, truly adaptive learning. And not what we've been told for the last 10 years. I mean, no one's been lying. That's just how the technology has limited us, right? But for the last 10 years, we've been told that adaptive learning is, look, Marcus, you and John, you work in the same department, and John liked the leadership tool module, so we're going to recommend it to you as well because you might like it as well. Or the HR algorithm has picked up that you and Peter have a similar role, and all those roles in the organization get module 3 of this e-learning pushed out to them. There we go, that's you. So truly adaptive learning has not been obtainable. And not only has it ruined everyone's enthusiasm for these learning, but we've also, in L&D, got to the point of utter dashboard fatigue. Because what are you going to see on the dashboard? You're going to see that Marcus has clicked through his program 64% up to here, and you haven't got a clue what Marcus has learned, what he hasn't learned, whether he's enjoying it, and at some point it's going to say he now has the certificate. No measurement, nothing. And that's what we can now change with the power of AI. And with Abrism, we're doing this. We're based in headquarters in Cambridge, but we've got offices in South Korea and in the States already. And this is really gathering speed at an incredible pace. And I've already mentioned the reason we couldn't do adaptive is because no one can build all the pathways by hand and tag it all and do that all correctly. By the time the learning program is ready, we're 3 years behind when it should have launched. And no one can keep that updated. But this we can now change with AI. And not only can the AI in seconds take your content, and it's always key to say the AI doesn't change your content. No one in health and safety or in any other important aspect would want the AI to change the content. The AI can take the content that you've given it, the learning materials, the questions, the videos, the audios, the 360 VR, and it can go through them and it can tag and map them automatically to the topics you're covering. You may call them modules, it doesn't matter. It can tag and map them completely automatically. It knows how topics are related or not and how they build up on one another. And therefore, all that pathway building, as we may have called it, what we've been doing by hand, the AI can do. And the AI can't just do that, which we call automate. The AI will also highlight to you which areas are not well populated with questions. The AI will highlight where you've got too much video or too much text and not enough diversity in the offering. So it is a content management tool as well as an adaptive learning tool. And now you've got that map. You can now dive in and fully adaptively consume the content of the learning program. It will recognize what you know about sustainability, and it will pick you up from your level where you should be picked up from, and nicely guide you through the learning experience. And guess what? The analytics, our third A as we call it, the analytics are fantastic. We've done something, we've patented multiplexed confidence sliders. So what that means is when you answer a multiple choice question on Abrism and you think 2 ticks are correct, you're going to for each tick have to say how confident you are. It's a really simple idea. But what really happens is that the AI knows exactly where you're confident and correct, where you're not so confident and incorrect, that's called a learner, or where you may be going through the Dunning-Kruger effect, you're highly confident but you're incorrect. because you're going through that phase of, yeah, I know my stuff now, here we go. All of those things, the AI can work with you. And it's not just a gimmick. We know from research that if you're asked how confident you are, your primary school teacher may have done this with you, you learn quicker whether you like it or not. When you have to rate how confident you are, you do self-reflection subconsciously and you learn quicker. There's good research from Cambridge University, for example, on that. And these analytics will now show you the progress you're making as the learner, and to the L&D team, it will show the L&D team how an individual's competence and confidence is improving in real time across the different topic areas. And then you can take that and you can compare individuals, teams, regions, global, however you want to compare it, the data is there. And you can make strategic decisions about further workshops, training, mentoring based on the data that you've got. And that is how this is completely revolutionizing learning. Now, I know you all didn't come here for a tech talk, so I've given you and set the scene here, and I'm going to hand over to you to my super colleague John here, who is going to take you through some case studies and bring this a bit more to life. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcus. Hi all. I'm John Fletcher. I'm the head of implementation here at Obrism. I just wanted to share a little bit of my background, just to add a little bit of context to this. I've been in learning development for the last 18 years. It's only in the last 9 months I've gone across to the vendor side, where beforehand I actually used to work for organisations rolling out learning management systems, learning ecosystems from the back. So that's where my experience has kind of come from. And I've moved across to a vendor side, and trust me, if you're ever going to do it, it's a very, very different world. But I'm really excited today to talk to you about one of our partners, our strategic partners, BSI. BSI for us was a really, really strong use case. They essentially wanted to go and launch their first ever commercially released adaptive training program. That's what they wanted to achieve, and we worked with them on the making commitment to a carbon neutrality. Now, we've all heard about net zero, we've all heard about sustainability, climate change. BSI are really leading the push within in the corporate world to drive the internal net zero and the carbon neutrality management plan within the organisation, and this course was really supporting them to do that. The audience of the course was sustainability professionals, so generally they had a good understanding of the subject area, and the purpose of it was for them to really bring in the organisation's baseline carbon footprint across the bottom. And they wanted to do that by establishing science-based targets, and also the corporate carbon neutrality management plan was really key for them. But what did the learner get out of it? They got a qualification out of it, an internationally recognised BSI Academy certificate from that. And I'm just going to touch on 3 of the key outputs of what we did with them. Firstly was 2 times faster to competency. Second one was 100% accuracy against exam predictions, which is really, really interesting. And the final one is we achieved over 214% revenue to target. And I'm going to support that with some data, because for us data is really, really important. But as head of implementation, what I actually want to do is just talk to you about the process that we went through in order to deliver against these brilliant targets and brilliant successes. So Marcus did a brilliant job in talking about automate, adapt, and analyze. That is the AI tech piece doing its work. But in order for the AI tech to truly work, we have to make sure that we feed in some brilliant stuff into it. So if you can think about, it's the old saying that we've all heard in learning, if you put poor stuff into it, you're going to get poor stuff out. Put poor data into it, you're going to get poor data out. When it comes to AI, it's very, very similar. If you put poor stuff into AI, ultimately you'll get poor stuff out, because the AI only ever analyzes exactly what's there. So when we worked with BSI, we embarked on a strategic implementation plan, and one of those elements within the plan was focusing around content. And the first part of content, there's 3 things I kind of want to touch upon with this. The first part is when we got hold of and worked with BSI for their content, we did a content audit. And in that content audit, we identified 3 core things. The first one is actually understanding the learning objectives and the direction of those objectives to the business objectives, so working it all the way back up. The second piece was the content itself. We did a full content audit. We understood exactly what their content looked like in their existing program, understood what the format was, which was predominantly SCORM-based, and started to really dive into that content. And within that, there were 2 kind of parts to it. One was looking at the content itself. And when we talk about adaptive content, I want to kind of give a bit of an insight here. Adaptive content isn't a new world format. It's nothing different from what you're doing at the moment. We're talking about engaging videos, PDFs, podcasts. We're talking about workbooks, documents. We're talking about stuff that's out on the internet. We're not talking about SCORM. We're removing SCORM from the equation and removing SCORM format from the world of adaptive learning. The second part to that is around, when we talk about content, we also talk in the second part is to do with questions. Now, questions have such a powerful use. And at the moment in the world of learning, I think we tend to just use questions as knowledge validation or competency validation. For me, questions are actually a core part of content. Think about scenario-based metacognitive, as Marcus mentioned about metacognitive questioning. Actually getting the learner at the point of when you're asking a really detailed question, maybe scenario-based, to really kind of dive in there is actually really, really important to do. Instead of just a yes or no, true or false, take this answer from 1, 2, 3 or 4, to actually start changing the mindset of the learner at the point of when the question's being asked is really, really important and something we really focus on. So with BSI, we did a big content audit of all of their content, all of their questions, and we brought it in. The third step that we did with BSI as part of the content and the implementation was really focusing on mindset. And this is a really interesting one. I'm sure we've all heard about content design process. Maybe you've heard of ADDIE or other content design processes that you tend to follow. Now, within that, there's one element where before you go through storyboarding and into build, you end up going out and trying to source all the content. That might be from an SME, it might be online and digital, it might be on the internet, it might be existing training content. The source of content in order for you to start building out a score module, for example, is huge. But what the design difference now with adaptive learning is you take all of that content and instead of you saying, okay, that piece of content there goes in, you then start to think about it from a curation perspective, not a content development perspective. You start looking at the content and going, okay, there's that piece of content or that learning, that links to that learning objective, but the reality is to understand that, you need to understand the context before and the context after. And it's that, the totality of it that needs to start bringing in. So we then started to work with BSI to start changing the mind shift around the content development approach with it all. From that, the output of that was some really effective learning content. It was about, I think, 150 to 170 learning content, or learning nodes as we call them. And that, from us, is where we then go bang, straight into the AI. That's because we structured it correctly, because we've got some really brilliant content, we then move that into our engines, into our AI. First off, it goes into the automate. We do something called contextualization, which is essentially analyzing all the different pieces of learning content against each other. And then there's a lot of data and analytics, and if you come to the stand just behind it, I'll go into a lot more in depth, and I can't do it in half an hour. So if you want to, just pop back. But essentially what they create is a knowledge space. A knowledge space is the equivalent to a course, but in a 7-dimensional world. If you can imagine, it's really interesting once you start to dive in and look at some of the courses that we build. It's really interesting to see how everything analyzes against each other from a content perspective. So at that point, we kind of go, great, we've got the fantastic knowledge base for BSI, we're ready to go on the course, and then we go live. Once you've then gone live, you then move into the personalized journey for an individual. So John logs onto the system, clicks on the relevant knowledge base that I want to learn from, and from that, he then starts progressing it through. Now, as the individual's progressing through, we have more tech AI analyzing every single interaction I'm having with that piece of content. Confidence about my confidence on a piece of content, confidence within a question, how I'm responding to that question, am I accurate in my responses to the question? So the whole of the data side of it, and that's where the analysis and adapt really come into play, is constantly analysing how I'm going through that piece of content. And that's how we're able to really identify and understand how knowledgeable somebody is, how they're progressing through their journey. Because we're analysing not only the content and their interactions with the content, but we're also analysing all of the data sat underneath it. And that's all done in real time, as someone's actually going through the journey and going through their individual course. So that's a little bit of the implementation that we followed. There was a lot of other steps sat underneath this in order to go live, as you would expect as part of an implementation. But the team that we did, the team that we have gone through this hundreds of times now with clients. But one thing I did just want to think about, I just wanted to go back to this content piece, because I think it's really, really important. Now, when we think about SCORM, we think about SCORM as a linear pathway. Within a SCORM module, you can, and some of the tools out there, you're starting to get a little bit adapted. You can start to say, well, okay, you can go here, and you can then build it out again and again. Before you know it, as Marcus said, you probably spent 6 months designing one course in order to go down the route of it. As I go back to what I mentioned before, once you get all of the content, the nodes of information, it's the AI that's driving the journey itself. And what that means is that instead of an individual, regardless of experience, having to do the whole course, what we're able to do, and the way that the AI works, is to be able to get an experienced individual only to see the core content that aligns to themselves based on their knowledge and understanding, i.e. the iceberg effect. So the individual would be able to see core content if they're really experienced and can prove to us and prove to the AI that they are experienced. The second part of this is that if you're a beginner, the beginner will ultimately need to do more content because they're not as experienced, because they haven't responded to the questions in an effective way, because their understanding of the content might be a little bit lower. Ultimately, they will then need to go through more content. So you might have a certification level of 80%, for example, but somebody experienced might go through it and take 53% of the content in order to identify that they're the right certification level, where a beginner might go through 80 or 90% of the content. And that's really, really important when you start to think about individuals in your organizations that you get an email through and saying, I already know half of this content, why the hell am I doing it again? Think about how many times you probably get that when you have to reset compliance training. You end up getting an email saying, I already know all of this, why are you making me do it? Well, now within our world, we're able to actually just, one, confirm that they are competent in that specific area, and if they are experienced, they will go through that content quicker. If they're not, then they won't do, and they'll go pull content that will naturally meet their knowledge levels and their understanding. So I just wanted to share that because it is a different mindset when you think about your content creation teams. It's a different mindset to actually creating content because you don't have to go through the whole storyboarding and the design process within a linear approach. You start to think about, okay, start shifting it from a content development perspective to content curation perspective. Still very similar skill sets, but it's a very different dynamic in the way that you go through building content. So what does that actually lead to? What did all this success do? Once we went live, what actually happened? First off, we were 2 times faster to completion. What this meant that on average, and somebody was taking 47 minutes in order to complete the module compared to 87 minutes beforehand. On average, they were taking 53, an experienced individual in sustainability was looking at 53% of the content for us to then confirm that they were at the right level and the right competency. And then that also then led into the 100% accurate prediction of the exam passes. That means that once they got to their completion level, they would then go on complete an exam on a different knowledge base, and 100% of them passed, which meant that the AI had actually driven them through the right amount of content in order for them to become certified against the content. And because it was only 53% of the content, it brought an improvement in the time to competency. The other interesting part is 73% of those individuals that went through also then went through further content past the point of when they become completed, once they become certified. So they're actually going on and wanting to learn more and more information as we're going through it, which is, I think, really, really cool and shows, again, a lot of data. And then finally, 214% increase target was revenue was achieved against the target that we'd set, which again, all of this lined up then drives a real commercial benefit for BSI, which was absolutely brilliant. So that's hopefully given you a little bit more of a context of the approach that we took through in order to build an adaptive AI-driven knowledge base and a learning journey for the users. Hopefully it's also kind of showed that it's not necessarily as complex as people might think in the world of AI, because there's a lot of stuff out there at the moment talking about AI and technology, et cetera, and it's not actually complicated when you drive into it. And hopefully it's kind of give you an indication that, you know, if you come and have a chat with us, we'll be able to work out the right use case and the best solution for yourselves in order to be able to drive, and we're on the stand 24 just behind the event. But what I wanted to now kind of do is just to open it up to any questions that we've talked about, or any questions you might have about AI at all. Yes, I'm going to have to take the mic around, so I do apologise.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was great and very exciting. 2 questions, if I may. So one was, you mentioned they can go back, so anyone using this can go back and do some additional learning. Just wondered if there's any features of the technology that kind of prompt that, so to aid continuous learning and to sort of build in those regular checks to say, right, you did the exam, you got 100%, 6 months later, if you did it again, be 20%.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a really key point there. The adaptive learning journey can also take into account spaced practice, repetition, keeping the skills up to date. All of that can be built in. And of course, with this adaptive approach, we can also now do research into what is the right spacing, usually for this material in this learning space, and that will further help learners. So that's a really good one that we can do that. And overall,
The other thing, so there's a lot of functionality in the system to go back and trigger, and we're building out new functionality. So one of the things that we're really passionate about is actually partnering with organizations to truly understand what their requirements are, not just say, here's the feature list, off you go. We actually want to work with organizations and partner, and that's something that both Chibeza Agli, who's our CEO, and the co-founders of the business are massively focused on, is driving what everybody actually wants, not what we think everybody wants, because every organisation is different. And you go around and you see a lot of learning systems, and the functionality is 95% pretty much the same, and there's normally like 10% which is a bit different. We're also working with our providers and our clients to actually say, what is it you really need? And then the other thing as well is that we don't want to just go and build something just for building's sake. We actually want to make sure that we're partnering with other tech providers that can do that maybe more effectively and more and better. In addition to building into your own tech stack that you have in an organization, we'll also then work with relevant communication platforms or relevant learning systems so we can then support and build into it. So we do a lot of integrations into other platforms to be able to drive some of that, and some of that functionality is actually better sat there instead of an employee getting 2 emails from 2 different platforms. There'll always be that consistent message towards them. That's, yeah. Does that all make sense? Cool. No.
And just one more aspect there, where we completely have to rethink the approach now with adaptive learning. When you have, for example, a textbook or a course, you have to limit what goes inside because you can't keep making it bigger and bigger and bigger. With an adaptive journey, you can put as many examples in as you like. No one's going to see them all, but they're there if someone requires them. And guess what? Your AI has read through them all, has looked at them all. You can now go in, and you don't have to follow the autopilot. You can research specific areas as you want to. You can even ask questions, and the AI will say to you, do you know what? The way you've formulated this question, I think you should be watching this video. And don't watch the whole video. Start at 24 minutes and 31 seconds and watch 2.5 minutes. We think that's the bit that you were looking for. So the search functionality, the learning in the flow of work, the looking things up, all of that is drastically changing. And that was kind of also what was behind this iceberg model that we showed there. Fantastic question, thank you.
Hi, thank you. Really great presentation, thank you. Question I had was, does this automatically push everything online, or how do you integrate this with still some face-to-face learning? Because for me, there's still quite a big role for that, but I don't know how you adapt that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When we think about adaptive learning is also about finding the right piece of content and delivering the right information to the employee in the best way. And you're absolutely right. It could be a face-to-face intervention that's required. We've got the ability to build in the classroom structure into our AI and live parameters against that. So at certain points throughout the journey, it can then say, we would advise you to go and do this workshop, we would advise you to go and do this piece of face-to-face interaction with it. And again, it comes back to where's all that information stored, because if you've got your own learning ecosystem and you've got a classroom registration kind of platform, it would be about, okay, well, at this point we know that they need to do this course, we'll fire them out to a relevant piece in order for them to go and identify it. In addition to, we've got our own functionality built into the system to be able to do that type of integration. But yeah, it's built into the adaptive journey. And when we think about content, you're absolutely right. We also VR as well. We can now ingest VR and 360 videos. Yeah.
But I guess that would also push any face-to-face learning towards a more bite-sized, like 45-minute, hour ones rather than maybe a half-day day, because you've got the same problem. It's going to be too general.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, it's about changing the design principle and the mindset on it. Thinking about how best to deliver that piece of information that best learning. And absolutely, there might be some that will go, we need to go and do a face-to-face workshop because it's a very hands-on practical. 100%. Question I would challenge is okay, is some of that theory can go into a digital format and can go into the adaptive learning? Can the knowledge retention, as we go back to it, in 6 months' time or 3 months' time or whenever your knowledge structure is, can that then be brought into the platform to drive it? And all of that then brings you data for you guys to make better informed decisions. It's not about data making your decisions for you. It's about understanding the data and then being able to make the decisions. And that's where you can kind of pilot stuff. So you can say, okay, the knowledge retention on a 1-hour course was 86% across the group. Against a 30-minute course was at 96%. So we need to then think about our design principle around those courses and think about how we then structure our courses going forward. And that's what it's about, driving the data off the back of that. Make sense? Any other questions?
And one more to that one, just generally, the impact this will have on L&D generally is far bigger than the digital journey. right? What we're used to is we're used to saying digital learning tends to be one size fits all, but we have this fantastic workshop next week, which is a half-day workshop. Well, when we think about it, the trainer is usually going to rock up with the same slides they used the week before for a completely different learning group with a completely different set of experience, and that is one size fits all. We just appreciate that if we can ask questions, it must be a little bit more personal. With the data that we can now produce, that trainer can come in and can say, these are the 15 people you're seeing next week for the half-day workshop. Here's how their knowledge and how their confidences are distributed, and they have the best handover ever. They can look at the learning group and they can say, I can leave these bits out, I'm going to focus on these bits. This will be the best half-day workshop those guys have ever seen. And then often the follow-up question I get is, well, how do you put that data back into the learning system? You don't have to. If you've ever helped your niece or nephew in maths or with their geography homework and they've gone away and over the weekend worked hard and practiced, when they come back, you say, oh, I notice you've practiced. You're much more accurate, you're much faster. So you don't need to feed anything back in, it'll pick that up immediately. And so the hand-in-hand of in-person and asynchronous will lift the whole system higher, not just a digital tool.
And we've actually just had a use case finished on that, so if you want to come and chat, stand 34 will be able to give you a use case specifically around that, which we had some data out.
Here we go.
Sorry, just a quick one. Just my understanding, is this a platform that you consume the learning on, or does it plug it into a platform that you consume the learning on?
Yeah, so we are not here to replace your LMS or your LXP or your HR system. This is a technology that plugs into the tech stack that you've got, and that just hypercharges the learning and the adaptive journey with the AI engines. So we can implement this with any existing system, any system that's out there. We've even implemented it now with the Royal Navy, and they built their own, as you can imagine. They don't have one that's generally available on the market. So these implementations are relatively straightforward with XAPI. And the only thing that's holding you back right now is that your LMS and your HR system aren't ready to save real-time data on competence and confidence across different areas. So that's for a while you'll rely a little bit more on the dashboards within the system. But those will quickly pick up in due course, and then those integrations will be relatively straightforward.
And that's my job. I have to deal with all the implementations and technical integrations with everything. So there's not one system I've yet come across that we can't integrate with. Hi, Josh. Got a question?
What's the biggest difference with Orbism in the marketplace?
I'll pass that across to you, Marcus. What's the biggest difference between Obrism and other competitors in the marketplace?
The biggest difference is that you will struggle to find solutions that can do something similar fully automatically. Things that we're doing fully automatically now, with regardless of what you have as an input, without any human tagging required. That is something that is unique. And once you've got that mapping, then you can fill the adaptive learning in. And then if you match someone's correctness and their confidence levels, like a sat nav, you use that iteratively to recalculate what someone's perfect journey is, then that's an absolutely unique offering at the moment. But of course, this is a developing area, and this is where the future lies. So we won't remain the only ones. But at the moment, with the technology being so fully automatic, that's completely unique. I built my first knowledge space after 15 minutes of training for the British Medical Journal, diabetes. And it's absolutely amazing. I still love to see it in action. I put all the materials in, and it said after 20 seconds, over here we've got women and pregnancy as a subset, because in diabetes, women and pregnancy only come together as a subset. There's no difference generally between males and females. It said over here's eyes, retina, and vision, and it didn't care whether it was a video, an audio, or a text file. The mapping was completely automatic. So that's a huge differentiator.
And I think the other thing as well, I mean, we've all been around the learning industry for a significant period of time. Generally, a learning organisation's built up from either somebody with an SME or somebody that's been in the learning industry has highlighted a difference. Our co-founders all came out of Cambridge University. Our focus is on technology. It just so happens we're in the learning space. Our technology can be used across multiple industries, and we're focusing on learning at the moment. And I think that's probably one of the key differences, is that we have individuals who are highly skilled in their skill set, not just getting people in from the learning industry just to drive the learning. And I think with that, it's a really solid recipe to make sure that we are driven by tech, we are driven by what we do and how we do things is very, very different. I'm conscious of time. If you do have any further questions, we're on stand 24, which is just right behind. But I think it leaves me to just say thank you very much. And I hope you have a great show and a great day.